Everyone, I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Finance Committee on February 28th, 2024. We'll start with open forum. If anybody has anything, I'll just remind everyone that this meeting is being recorded. Nothing on mine. Okay. All right. First agenda item is to review and make recommendations for articles at the March 23rd town meeting. The first one on our list is Article 18, which is the MBTA Communities Multifamily Housing Overlay District Zoning Bylaw. And Jeff Morissette, who's going to be doing that presentation, is at a different meeting. He'll be here soon, so we're going to skip ahead and we'll fit him in when he arrives. So we'll start with Article 8, which is to approve capital appropriations. Dan gave us a presentation on this, I think it was on our February 5th meeting. So I don't know if anyone has any other questions before we, yeah.
I do, I have one. We are in a situation here where the selectmen have now offered or recommended the override, which has to be passed or not passed by the town meeting. Should the matter not pass, I was thinking that it's very important for us to really evaluate where there's extra cash. And one of the traditional places to go is to look at the capital budget, right? So I went through the capital budget, and I just want to open discussion on this. And under the capital budget, under Article 8, there are some expenses that I think could be questioned and maybe reconsidered. One is the $15,000 Hartford Road calming, the $30,000 design for North Main Street, $25,000 for Groton Road, the $600,000 construction for Plain Road, and a couple more. Vehicle replacement for the one-ton pickup, and supplemental appropriations for the Jack Walsh tennis basketball. My recommendation would be that we do not encumber these funds right now. If the override were to pass, then you can still take them out of free cash or whatever and apply them. But I think that given the situation that we don't know which way this is going to go, I think it would be very, very prudent upon us to be able to put some more money in reserve just in case things go one way over another. So.
Okay, well, let me ask you something. So if these passed at town meeting, but the override doesn't pass, and for whatever reason we need some free cash, do you have to spend the money on these things once they're appropriated, or will we have to rescind them or something?
Depending on the dollar value, the select board authorizes contracts over $10,000. So they could say, no, we're not authorizing the contract.
Okay.
Again, our policy is generally not to use free cash to supplement the budget. Obviously, we're in times that are unprecedented, but I think we would still recommend to not use a substantial amount of free cash to fund the fiscal year 25 budget.
Okay.
So I went through. Okay, I'm sorry.
Well, I'm just thinking. So we do have a mechanism to take care of that. It's after the fact. But that said, if FinCom wants to recommend some of these not in a block, if we want to pull some out, we can do that.
Yeah, because I think Chris kind of just said the magic word. This is an unprecedented situation. And in such a situation, we have to be able to kind of think a little bit out of the box and to try to prepare for certain things if they go the wrong way. And I looked at these. I selected these because these are good things to have. I'm not knocking them. I would support them. But under the circumstances, we can get along without them for at least a year, maybe for at least a year. So that's why I offered those.
Okay, Heather, do you want to? And then I'll continue.
I would also offer, when the technology groups came before Capital, the school computer replacement had a high cushion because of declining enrollment. The numbers being purchased aren't necessarily being adjusted down. So there was, the committee felt like it's only $10,000, but, in light of what we're talking about, $10,000 is $10,000. So I had intended to vote for that, but I do want it on record that there's extra money there. They say if they don't spend it, they'll use it next year, and somebody's got to keep track of that. And then the only other one I would mention is, I'm still a little hung up on the school's EV van. I don't know if we should be buying such an expensive van, and I don't know the numbers of kids, and I'm not sure it ever came up, but I don't even know if this is handicap accessible. So I have a little reservations on that one, in addition to, I think some of those things on Dennis's list are good to hold too.
Okay. Hari, did you have something?
So the amount of capital appropriations, assume that the override passes, or they're
No,
independent of?
Independent.
Okay. So one question probably not related here, but let's say if a capital line item is approved by town meeting, and suddenly there is no need for it, or there are no funds for it. Let's assume that any reason, the administration cannot pursue it, or they have to pursue it.
So we've had instances in the past where, like we got the courier van, electric courier van for the school, and then we applied for a grant for it. Got the grant, just returned the money to the general fund at year end. Each year, at the end of the year, so each department head has to request to carry forward their capital amounts if it's not spent yet. So in that particular instance, we had to close back to free cash, and that money was available for future years.
In the case what you mentioned, the need was fulfilled.
Yes.
Right? I'm asking a case where the need may not be fulfilled for any of the reasons. If the town approves it, it has to be implemented.
No.
No, no.
No,
So-
just like.
It's the
operating
it's
budget.
the authorization to move forward.
Authorization, not a needing.
Correct.
Thank you.
Just
ahead, Emmett.
to follow up on that though, isn't there kind of a lag on when things get closed out? So would it really be accessible right away? So, for example, if I'll pick on that highway truck, if we decide not to buy that highway truck, it's still appropriated, and those don't necessarily get closed back really quickly to become available to use, right?
Only if it's not needed, then we don't do it, but, you know, it's not that often, in 3 months you determine something you've been asking for 5 months isn't needed. So, yeah, it usually doesn't happen that fast unless we get money elsewhere, then we're safe to return it.
I think that timing would give me a little bit of hesitation too, because it's obviously not gonna drop off somebody's radar just because,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying?
I see what you're saying, but
Yeah.
I think we should probably just go based on kind of a little bit of a simpler scenario. You know, if something happens later, if the override doesn't, whatever, we're gonna have to scramble and rethink anyway. So I don't know that we should be trying to anticipate that now. I think we should kind of try to go ahead. If there are certain things on here that we want to vote separately, then that's fine. I think, you know, we can pull them out, we'll vote everything else, we'll discuss those things.
Just a point on that, and I'll end my comments. This will go to a March 23rd town meeting.
Yep.
If it passes, the ballot won't hit till what, May?
May
Right.
7th.
Right? So the town can move forward on all these contracts and lock us into those contracts in that period of time.
These are 24.
Hang
right?
on,
Sorry.
once it's voted at town meeting, could they, let's say, order the trucks or start spending that money right after?
Yes.
Yeah.
It would have to go to the select board for
Select board for,
approval.
so
But
we
we've
still
still
have to
got
do
this select
bidding.
board.
We have to do bidding, it has to go to select board. So it's likely going to be a 6-month a 6-week process. So
Yeah.
I don't see someone going out the next day and going to the select board meeting on
doesn't
March
happen,
26th.
right. It doesn't happen that quickly.
You know,
Yeah.
there's a lead
Yeah.
time.
I think government will move slow enough, Dennis. I don't think that's an
Maybe we can
issue.
have faith in that?
Yeah, I think so.
I also would put trust and faith in the department heads to understand, everyone understands very clearly
Yeah.
what would happen if the override is not passed at any step. And I would venture to say that most department heads are going to protect the existing services over, rushing to make a purchase.
I think so too. All right,
So-
one more and then,
So this is more general education for me. The budget we are passing is from July 1st, 2024 to June 30th, 2025, right? So we can start the process for capital acquisitions now, immediately after, but no payments can be made until July 1st. Is it correct? Or
No.
it can be done, but we can put the
Not in this instance. We're using available fund free cash, which is already certified. So when you appropriate free cash, it's available right away. So we don't have to wait till July 1st to purchase capital.
Got it.
But again, like Tom said, I really do think that the department heads, Kristen, the select board, you know, we understand that there's that time in between March and May that we need to be careful of. Go ahead.
Just one more thing, because I've been on Capitol for a while. I do feel like since it's, there's new members, that the asks have crept up over time. I mean, I don't even, what is this? 3.6 million. I feel like the free cash numbers used to hover around 2 or less, and they've just been kind of creeping up over time. Part of that's expenses, but it is concerning to
Yeah.
bless those higher dollars.
Okay. So are there specific items that we don't want to vote as a block, or do we want to vote this whole thing as a block?
Well, I can motion these out, and the ones that I selected, and then you can decide yay or nay, and then move on, and then if you
Okay.
want to do it that way. So I might not even get a second, so that'll take care of the whole thing.
Okay, so
But-
which
but I-
ones,
I would
Dennis?
I would motion that we recommend that we do not spend, that we do not authorize spending for the 15,000 on Hartford Road, the 30,000 design for West Street, 25,000 design and construction, Groton Road, the construction of Plain Road Phase 2 pedestrian safety, the vehicle replacement 1-ton pickup truck with a plow, and the supplemental appropriation for the Jack Walsh tennis and basketball court. And lastly, equipment replacement for the pole camera, which comes to about just under $1 million.
Okay, I just want to make sure that I'm grabbing all of the right ones.
That one. Not that one. This one. They're
Well,
only getting
okay.
2.
Well, but I don't want to be
Okay.
too stingy.
Okay, well, I would second that, but I would want to add the 6-wheel dump truck and the school's van. If you'll amend it.
I'd be glad to.
Can I make a clarification?
Yeah.
Just on the pole camera, that's coming out of Stormwater Enterprise. So like that cash can't be used to go back to the operating budget, really.
All right, I can switch one and put
Okay.
the other one in. So we'll drop the pole camera and we'll put in the SUV.
The 65,000 for the SUV?
Yeah.
All right, I just want to make sure I have them. I'm going down in order. So schools, 125,000, special ed van.
Yeah. No, did I say
Yes,
that?
I said that.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Heather added that one.
All right.
Engineering, 15,000 for Hartford Road.
Yep,
Another engineering, 30,000, the design of West Street at North Main Street. Engineering, 25,000 for the design and construction Groton Road, pedestrian safety improvements.
yep.
The 140,000 vehicle replacement, is that the trucks that you wanted, or is there a different one?
You got the 600,000 on construction, so the next one is the 80,000 vehicle replacement 1-ton truck with plow.
Oh, for the cemetery.
Cemetery.
Okay,
But I
all right.
wanted the $300,000 truck.
All right, so you wanted the 300,000.
All right, so I'm taking that one out.
And then the last one
The-
was the Jack Walsh Field.
Very,
Where's
very
the
bottom
Jack
one.
Rush? Oh, this one,
Bottom.
okay. What about the 65,000 replacement SUV, or no?
You, do you want that?
I don't care about that.
I don't care about it either.
I'm gonna take that one.
Yeah, take that out.
Okay. So why don't we do these like we do town meeting, and we will hold those.
Sure,
We'll vote the rest, and then we'll come back.
that sounds good.
Okay, so can I get a motion to recommend everything except the items we held?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, Ingrid? Yes, okay, Shelby?
Aye.
Aye. I'm an
Sorry,
aye.
yes.
There you go.
Yep, okay. Aye. Tom?
Aye.
Harry?
Aye.
Dennis?
Aye.
Heather? Okay, so those pass, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 to 0.
Take each one.
Yeah, I think we'll take each one. Okay. So the school's 125,000 special education EV van purchase. Somebody want to make a motion to?
I
We're
have,
going to put all of them together.
No, I
We'll
think
do
we
them
should
separate.
do them separate.
Yeah.
No problem.
so I have questions on the schools. Like, they never told us if that was handicap accessible, right?
They didn't specify, but
It's a special education van,
It's
so.
it is a special education van, so.
So what is driving it to be so expensive? Is it the price? Like,
Okay,
I
amended-
mean,
It's a
I see these
combination of
Ford,
EV and
whatever's
size.
out there. Are those comparable in price?
Yeah.
I think so.
So even if, there's no way they can scale that down to a less expensive?
I don't think
That's
so.
actually kind of cheap, I think.
Yeah.
All right.
yeah, and so it's and equipped, so I would say that that's more than just buying the vehicle, so that's,
Okay, I never had clarification on that, and I didn't really think of it at the time, and I just want to make sure that we're buying something that is going to satisfy all the needs.
It's for the after-school program, the
No,
adult program, the
yeah, the
18 to 22.
18 to 22.
So I would think it'd need to be.
Okay.
again, I lean to having trust that they're looking at the right equipment for the need, so.
You can let that go. That's a good one.
Okay.
Somebody want to make a motion to recommend that, and then we'll vote accordingly?
I motion to recommend that.
I second.
Okay. So all in favor, in this, we're voting, the school's $125,000 special education EV van purchase. Ingrid?
Aye.
Shelby?
Aye.
I'm an aye. Tom?
Aye.
Aye.
Hari? Aye.
Aye.
Dennis? Aye.
I'm good now.
So
Aye.
you're an aye?
Yeah.
Okay, so that passes 7-0. Okay, next, DPW engineering, 15,000, Hartford Road traffic calming measures.
I'll move that we not approve it.
Why don't we do, I feel like it's easier if we recommend and then
Okay,
you
that's
just vote
fine.
no.
That's fine.
Yeah, just to make
Yeah.
it
That's fine.
clear.
I think
I
we should vote.
recommend we approve the traffic signs 15,000.
So, okay, motion to recommend,
I'll second.
second. Okay, all
Any
in,
discussion or?
any discussion on that? Anybody need anything on that?
The only thing I would just say is that the calming traffic calming measures are, we've gotten by with them up to this point. 1 year isn't going to make a big difference. And I think just for the contingency issue, I think justifies holding it back.
Okay. All right, so all in favor, Ingrid?
Aye.
Shelby?
Aye.
I'm an aye. Tom?
Aye.
Aye.
Hari? Dennis?
Our vote is to approve it or not?
To a
Right, nay.
recommend.
Nay.
So you're a nay. Heather?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so that
to 1.
is 6-1. Next one, engineering, $30,000 for the design of West Street at North Main Street pedestrian safety improvements. Any questions?
I would move to recommend it.
Second.
Discussion?
So I think this is one of the things I think that has been brought up other times where, I mean, it's the intersection by the church, I believe, to get the kids over to Blanchard. So I do think there's been issues there, so I would approve that one, but it's tough because you're spending $30,000 just for the design, and then we're gonna spend an additional, and it seems like so much money for something that shouldn't be that hard. So I just putting that out there, but I know that there's been a significant issue over there before.
I hear you. I understand that too, but where that intersection is problematic, I would hate to put that off.
Yeah, I agree. It's just, by the time you
Yeah.
add in construction, it's a huge dollar amount, and it's
Yeah.
kind of overthought or
And we do have St.
overanalyzed.
Catherine's in favor right now, so they are, we don't know what might change in terms of their philosophy, so while they are in favor, I think
good
it's
time.
prudent to move forward with that.
Sure. Okay, so we had a motion and a second, right? Okay, so all in favor, Ingrid,
Aye.
Shelby,
Aye.
I'm an aye. Tom,
Aye.
Hari, Dennis?
Nay?
Aye.
Okay, so that's 6-1. Next, $25,000 for the design and construction Groton Road pedestrian safety improvements. Any questions?
Can you remind us where this is, Dan?
Yeah, it's
5 Mile Road.
between Farmers Way and Linwood Lane.
Kind of
So
Stony Brook.
again, it's the school.
It's a school,
And
And again, it's only, it's design and construction for 25.
yeah.
So way cheaper.
I think Newport was kicking in some of the
Oh,
cost
okay.
of this too, and there's accessibility with a child that lived on Linwood as well, so.
Okay, do we have a motion?
I make a motion to recommend.
No, second.
Second? Okay, so all in favor, Ingrid?
Aye.
Shelby?
Aye.
I'm an aye. Tom?
Aye.
Aye.
Kaveri, aye. Dennis?
I'll vote aye on this one.
Okay.
Aye.
Heather? Okay, so that is a 7-0. Okay, down to $300,000 vehicle replacement, six-wheel dump truck with plows.
Question, what happened to the $600,000?
Next one.
So, isn't that, I guess I'm following the motions, and that's later in my motions document.
Well,
Because we're
item-
bonding that, we're bonding
Yeah,
the 600,000.
it's a second, it's in the second, I'm looking at the motions document. It's in the second motion, that's why I've got it later.
But Dennis, the warrant just lists all of the capital
Yeah.
in order, but
So if you're bonding that, what is the cost and the debt?
Well,
Like-
well,
Yeah, I was gonna say, which one?
I'm not at that, which
Oh,
one?
okay.
The- are you at the
We're
truck or the-
bonding, we're not bonding anymore. We're using the fair share
Yeah,
apportionment.
this is for the vehicle.
Oh, okay.
I'm still at the vehicle.
vehicle.
Dennis has it a little, it's a different order, I guess.
I have it on the warrant, so.
Okay.
I'm
Yeah, I'm
not-
going
I
through
got
the
the vote.
motions, so, and I think they're in a different order.
So,
Okay.
So we're back on the 300,000 for the vehicle replacement for the six-wheel
I
dump
got
truck,
you.
which is, this one's out of free cash. This is the third,
Yeah.
Yes,
third
the other two
one.
will come out of the fair share apportionment.
Okay.
Just a comment on that.
Mhm.
All right, so we had a conversation with the DPW, and they expressed that they were basically doing a review of the whole fleet. This is a very, very big burden to do 3, 4, 5 dump trucks at one time. And I think, given the situation, we have to be selective about which ones they are. I think this one can be held back.
I agree.
And just to note that Capital did not recommend this particular vehicle
No
as
kidding.
well. Yeah.
So what's the breakdown of capital, like how many positive, like I know capital,
It was 4 to 5 to
So
not recommend,
not
so
much.
it was split.
So we wanted 4, we revisited and tried to drop it to 2 and approve that by 5 to 4.
And the select board voted last evening to approve the third one.
Mhm.
To recommend, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
Any other questions, or
No.
should we get a
Can I just
motion
make
to?
comments?
So-
Yeah,
for 300,000, how many vehicles do we get?
That's one.
1.
There's 2 additional in the bonding later.
No,
It's
there's
not
2
in bonding.
additional.
No, it's not in bond, it's
Not
fair
bonding,
fair
sorry,
share.
That's
Yeah.
right, sorry.
Heather?
So, I've been on Capital for a while. We do replace vehicles on a regular basis. I've never seen 4 asked for in 1 year. And it's kind of funny, this kind of gets back into the government aspect of things, but the mileage on these cars, I know they're like 20 years old or 30 years old, but it's tiny mileage. It's like 3,000 miles a year that they're putting on these vehicles for $300,000. So I'm going to vote no on this as well.
I do just want to remind the Finance Committee that we sent you details on the request on February 13th. You may not recall, but these have been put off for quite some time. We do have Kyle Fox on the line as well if you do have questions. I know the mileage is low, but the hours that they're running and the amount of time they're out at sites is quite substantial, and we are quite a bit behind in these types of vehicles. We actually have one in the shop right now and one we don't think that we can repair, and the time frame to get these to us is 18 months to 2 years.
Under normal circumstances, I wouldn't even argue with you. But given the situation, I think we have to make some hard decisions. That's what I think.
So, just clarifying on that lead time, how much do we lay out prior to receiving the vehicles?
We
So-
don't pay,
Right.
we don't pay anything.
Right.
So, an approval in March at this point is really a commitment in a year and a half. So,
Okay, are we ready to
Sure.
make a motion and vote? Somebody want to make a motion to recommend? You can vote no.
I'm behind it, but I'm not so strongly that I can make a motion.
Okay, I'll make a motion to recommend. Somebody want a second?
A second
We
to
at least need
move
to.
the process.
We at least need to move the process, right? Okay, second. Okay, Ingrid,
No.
Shelby,
No.
I'm a no. Tom,
No.
Kari,
Same, no.
Dennis,
No,
No,
Heather, no. So it does not pass,
Or not
Or-
recommended.
not this year,
it's not recommended.
not recommended
And is that unanimous?
yeah.
for the amount of number that are here.
Yeah.
Okay, next is the cemetery, the $80,000 for vehicle replacement, 1-ton dump truck with a plow, purchase and equipment. Any comments or questions on that?
I just think it can wait a year.
I agree.
Okay, so somebody want to make a motion then, and we'll vote?
I move to recommend.
Somebody second?
I think you're gonna second.
I'll second. Okay.
That's why you guys get the big bucks.
Yeah, yeah.
Big bucks.
Double, right? All right. All in favor, Ingrid? This is for the cemetery?
No.
No. Shelby?
No.
I'm a no.
I'm a yes.
Hari?
Yes.
Dennis?
No,
And Heather?
No.
It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
2 yes, I know.
kind of interesting.
2 to 5. Right?
2 to 5.
Yeah, okay.
Could I just add one comment on that afterward? At some point, I'd like to see some of these get funded out of the cemetery funds instead of free cash.
Are you envisioning a cemetery enterprise?
I'm sorry?
Are you envisioning a cemetery enterprise fund?
No, but they have,
Yeah.
they have the sale of lots fund, and they also have the interest on the perpetual care fund. So there's 2 funds out there, and I don't have the balances on the top of my head, but
There's about 80 for the sale, the perpetual care, the expendable trust, which we're gonna use to offset the operating budget moving forward. That's in the plan, and then the sale of lots is for cemetery expansion and embellishments, so I don't know if.
Okay.
Vehicles.
if we
Yeah.
can use-
Okay.
The
use it for
the
vehicles.
balances unfortunately are not huge in those accounts, and especially, they are at least gonna be using the 10,000 going forward to
Right.
offset operating, but I hear the
Okay.
comment. I mean, if,
Thank you.
yeah, things change.
making the comment.
Yep. Okay, next one is Parks and Grounds, $67,000 supplemental appropriation for the Jack Walsh Tennis and Basketball Court Improvement Construction Project. So as I remember this one, it's already started. This is just supplemental.
It's bid, the bids came in higher than expected, so we have a certain amount on hand appropriated. This is to supplement that. If we don't supplement that, we anticipate the bids will only be higher when we future bid.
Yeah. Okay.
And how much is the amount that's already appropriated? Is it 400?
It's 400 and some odd. Yep.
And- Yeah, and
I have a question.
So the whole 400 would be freed up if we held it.
it's
No, it's
CPA
already-
money, so.
Oh, it's CPA money?
So, yeah, that's where my question is, like, since the 400 is already appropriated, if we say no to this 67, what happens? The bids will not be approved and we will come back again?
Will-
Will the project gets halted if we don't do this?
We could redesign the project and rebid it at a lower scope. We anticipate that the bids are still gonna come back higher than what we got out to bid. We have this bidder holding their price till town meeting to see if this supplemental appropriation comes due.
And CPC won't pay for this.
No.
No, they didn't.
Do the
They didn't
supplemental.
cover.
Did they vote it?
I don't recall. I think they were approached and they were just not interested in.
Maryland last night said they had over 10 million worth of applications and not enough cash on hand to fund them all. So we thought during capital, it was suggested that we pay for this out of free cash.
And I will say that, living in that neighborhood, wait, sorry, is this the one in Nab or no?
No, this
No.
is
No, this
Griffin
is-
Road.
Sorry. I was gonna say Nab is always used from what I'm seeing, but
And I do live in the neighborhood, and I mean, the tennis complex is Robinson School. I mean, it's a massive complex now where everybody's at. At this point in time, I don't know if this is that urgent.
So the reason why Jack Welch is because when people drop off their kids for the soccer, they kind of try to spend time here.
Yeah.
I have a couple comments on that, but I'm not on these committees, so I do live in that neighborhood. and it would be nice to have those basketball courts, but I think the tennis courts are a big part of this too, and I feel like that this wasn't designed really. I'd like to see some designs done that incorporate different kids from different age groups, and right now you've got basketball, tennis, and a pretty junior level playground. I'd like to see things that might get that middle school group, like that game where they have the little wall and it's an
Gaga
octag, whatever it is, and just something, 4 squares and stuff like that. So I kind of have issues with this project to begin with. But I'm going to vote no on this because I feel like that it does need to come out of the CPC funds, and people, I think, want to see things like this paid for with their CPC funds. And, if there's not enough in CPC, then I don't know what the answer is there. Maybe they do scale back down. But I don't think we should use our free cash for this.
Not this year.
Okay. All set on questions? We ready to make a motion?
Make a motion to recommend.
I second.
Okay. All in favor?
Second.
Ingrid?
Aye.
Shelby?
Aye.
I'm an aye. Tom?
Aye.
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 Nay.
And
No.
Heather? No. Okay, so that's 5
5
to
to
2. Okay. Now we are on to the $600,000 for pedestrian safety improvements on Plain Road.
Plain Road.
Any questions on that?
Wait a minute, let me just
So
find
that
it.
goes from East Boston Camps to Grassy Pond?
I always forget which one this
Yes,
is.
that's the
Yes.
phase 2, yes,
Okay.
correct.
This is to complete the sidewalk project.
Correct, yes, phase 1 has already been appropriated.
Is that still on, which reference on that, on the motions are you
The
on?
second
This is the
motion.
second motion.
The second motion, establish no right, stabilize, all right. I
Because
have,
it's
Second
bonding.
motion under Article 8.
Yeah.
under Article 8, thank you very much. That really helps. Okay, I got you. Second motion.
Any questions on that?
So it's all design, this is just construction.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And I have one more question. Are things like this allowed to come to special town meeting, or is that really for things that are kind of timing of the essence?
Well, so we are going to construction for phase 1 in April of this year. There is a potential that we can actually finish this whole project if it's appropriate at this town meeting, which the economies of scale of getting it all done at one time
Yeah.
is more advantageous for the town.
Do you have a dollar figure for that, just to quantify it, or not really?
I don't know.
I think everything's just gonna go, it's just
Right.
gonna keep going
And
up.
things are, right, you're right.
And I
costs
live
are-
in that neighborhood, and people are walking constantly. I mean, it's in constant use. Any other questions, or?
No.
Okay, so we have a motion to recommend.
Motion to recommend?
Second?
I second.
Okay. All in favor? Ingrid?
Aye.
Shelby?
Aye.
I'm an aye. Tom?
Aye.
Aye.
Harry?
Aye.
Dennis? Aye.
Due to combining, I'd say aye.
Okay. 7-0. I think that's it.
That's Article 8.
We whittled away
Oh,
on that.
yep.
Yeah. Those are the ones we held. Okay. All right. Article 8 completed.
Article
Did I do
9.
the
Let's go to-
ambulance one?
They didn't put it, hold on.
Yep.
sorry.
Let's do Article 9.
Yeah, this is an interesting.
Approve construction of the PFAS treatment plants.
I have a question.
Question, Dennis?
Yeah, so PFAS has been a problem for what, 20 years at least? And I'm just wondering what the rationale behind the construction of a treatment plant for it right now is.
So we
How's it
have,
working?
yeah, we have Mark Warren in the line and Kyle Fox from DPW. Would you mind?
I'd love to hear what
answering
they
a
have to
question?
say,
Okay.
absolutely.
Would you mind helping with that?
Yes, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
My video's not working, but at least you can hear me. So it's an excellent question. They've been around for longer than 20 years, actually, probably since the 40s. But what's changed now is that the EPA is on the verge of regulating PFAS at a new low level. They're currently regulated by the state of Massachusetts, but the EPA has come up with draft water quality standards which greatly exceed the Massachusetts standards. And if that happens, we will not be able to meet them. So that's where the need for treatment comes in, federal regulation. And then once the feds lower their levels, the state will have to follow suit as well.
And if I understand correctly, if we do not approve and appropriate this at town meeting, then we lose access to grant loans, correct?
Yeah, we need to appropriate these funds by June 28th of this year to be eligible to apply for the SRF loan.
That's all right.
The state revolving fund, which, it's a low interest rate loan between 0 and 2%. We're probably looking at 2%. So if we did not appropriate these funds at this town meeting, it would put us a year behind the process. Would have to get back into the queue next year.
Okay.
And this is coming out of Water Enterprise.
Right,
that
this is out of
payment's
water,
that-
water enterprise.
Correct.
Any other questions?
This is already factored in to the rates they're paying?
No, it's not.
So everybody's gonna have a rate increase then as well?
Yes, so there's going to be a presentation with the select board and the water commissioners in April to discuss the forecasts for the next 10 years for water rates, not only related to PFAS, but the entire system.
Correct.
Could
Yes.
we be alerted to that
Yeah, of
meeting,
course.
just as a heads up?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
My only question on this is, so I know it's coming out of the water enterprise, and so the water users are gonna be paying for this. If for some reason the water enterprise cannot cover the cost, does it default to the town like the rec enterprise and the other enterprises, or how does that work?
Any bond issue defaults to the town, if the enterprise doesn't cover it, so yes.
Okay.
Just a comment on this, if you could. I think people who are watching this should know that, as was just reported, and this is just for future reference, that the EPA is mandating this. Under normal circumstances, the EPA has no right to be able to mandate things in a state, because it's the Constitution. But in 2009, the Massachusetts legislature opened this up and allowed the EPA to directly regulate our inland waterways and everything else, and basically put the DEP on a second tier. So I just want people to know that this was this legislative action that, as you'll pick up a definite trend on legislative actions that are impacting the town. This is one of them. So I just want to put that on the record.
Yeah, I definitely, I get your point on that, Dennis, and I'm in favor of this because I do think we need to treat our water, we need to take advantage of that loan, but I think this goes on the list of unfunded mandates that needs to be looked at.
Can you remember, does this cover all the wells or just a certain well? I can't remember.
There's 2 treatment plants that it will cover all of the wells, all of the water source in Westford.
Okay. Any other questions?
No choice, really.
Can I get a motion to recommend Article 9, construction of the PFAS treatment plants?
Move motion to recommend.
Okay, so Hari's
I'll
recommend.
second.
You'll second.
Just to keep the note taker on
Okay.
their toes.
All in favor, Ingrid?
Aye.
Shelby?
Aye.
I'm an aye. Tom?
Aye.
Hari, aye.
Reluctant
Dennis?
aye.
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 Okay, so that is 7-0.
Go down.
Okay. This is actually probably a good time to go back to Article 18 since Jeff is here. Are you ready to go, Jeff?
As long as,
And Joe?
as long as you don't want to sit to catch your breath for a minute.
I just, before we went, if we went into Article 1, we'd be here for an hour before you.
So is that a fair price or no? I don't know.
Jeff, do you want to run this, or are you comfortable just telling me to go? Skip sides, or Joe, either?
You got promoted, right?
I think we're comfortable. We'll give you some guidance.
Just give me the nod, okay?
So Jeff Morissette, your Director of Land Use Management. Joe Jonas, Town Planner. So first, we want to thank you folks for giving us this opportunity tonight to discuss the proposed MBTA zoning bylaw amendment. Town meeting is coming up fast, well under a month, March 23rd, so we appreciate this opportunity to better inform the voters. So we're just going to give a brief overview of the requirements, our deadline for compliance, what happens if we do not comply, where the proposed district is, some of the potential impacts, and then lastly, we'll go over our approach and try to answer any questions you folks might have. So first, what is an MBTA community? If we'd asked you 2 years ago, you would say, not Westford. But Westford is one of the 177 Massachusetts communities that has either MBTA service or is adjacent to a community that has MBTA service. So we are an MBTA adjacent community because the towns of Littleton and Acton have commuter rail service from MBTA. And then we're going to go a little into the requirements. So what are the requirements for Westford for being an MBTA community?
Sure. So stemming back to the 2021 Economic Development Bill, this is kind of the genesis for this mandate coming out. The state was looking at economic development data and recognizing that there were a number of potential employers and employees that were leaving the state. Employees specifically, 25 to 45 age range, that were just finding the price of housing unattainable for them to be able to continue to live in Massachusetts, which in turn prompted employers to be leaving Massachusetts. So they really saw this as a need that needed to be filled in order to keep economic development going in Massachusetts. So Dan, you want to skip forward? Maybe one more slide. As Jeff mentioned, we are an adjacent community, one of 177. You can see on the map Westford circled there. Next slide, please. So the state did provide guidance as to what the proposed bylaw, proposed district had to contain. So it has to allow a minimum of 15 dwelling units per acre. That's very difficult to obtain in Westford, given our septic needs for any particular development. But that is the minimum requirement that we need to allow. It cannot restrict any kind of housing based on age or number of bedrooms, so it has to be able to provide for families. And it has to create the potential for 924 dwelling units, and that's based on our 2020 census data. So that's how that number was came to be. But there is no requirement that any of this housing needs to be built. There's no timeline, no requirement that any of this housing needs to get built. That being said, the advisory committee throughout this process did try to look at what could be some short, medium, long-term opportunities to try to address some of the housing needs that the town does have. On the gloom and doom side of things, what happens if we don't comply? I don't know if anybody's been following the town of Milton. They're, I guess, the test case for what happens if you don't comply with the state mandate. Even back March 2023, the state has been very adamant that compliance is mandatory. It's not a may, it is a shall comply with this requirement. The town of Milton recently came out of compliance 2 weeks ago based on a special election that they had. Since that time, the state has rescinded a grant of over $140,000 for seawall improvements. So I imagine the residents that were going to benefit from that are not too happy now. And as of today, the state did bring a lawsuit and sued the town of Milton in Superior Court. We don't want to take that route, I don't think, and go down that road. We'd rather keep this a positive experience and actually accomplish some good for the town. So next slide, please. We'll start to go through what has the town kind of done to date and what have we been kind of factoring in as we develop this draft district and draft bylaw. So really started back in 2022 strategic planning retreats, starting to get feedback of what people thought where this could be, what their thoughts were, what the town needed. From that, we developed an action plan that was approved by the select board in December and then later by the state in January 2023. We held a focus group with those aged 55 and older to understand what their housing needs were. Next slide, please, Dan. We were successful in getting some grant funds in order to hire a consultant, Dodson and Flinker, to help us draft the proposed bylaw and go through the planning process. We also got technical assistance from our regional planning agency, NIMCOG. We formed the advisory committee, the MICMAC, which is made up of a number of stakeholders. Hari was included on that. Thank you, Hari, for volunteering to be on that from the finance committee. We also had representation from the select board, chaired of the MICMAC, John Cunningham is here. We also had representation from the planning board, zoning board, economic development committee, and school committee, as well as some residents in large. So a variety of perspectives. They met over a dozen times since the middle of 2023 through the end of this year to help us draft where should this be and what should the requirements be. So next slide, Dan. Again, went to 2023 strategic planning retreat, had some roundtable discussions, held a design workshop, again, seeing what people want this housing to look like, should it be developed. And now we've opened the public hearing with the planning board in January, and is likely to be closed on Monday, March 4th, in order to go to town meeting. And cover a few trends that also we looked at. For the town of Westford, the town's population has outpaced the rest of our region since 2010 to now, by again to any other community within our region. And when we look at population change projected through 2040, that is continuing to show that Westford would be growing faster than any of our neighboring communities. Housing stock, we are over 80% of our housing stock is single family homes and owner occupied, so it's not a very diverse housing stock that we have currently. The median home value is also outpaced everyone now. Westford has the highest median home value, and our population of those that are 45, 55 and older is over 1/3 and is looking to continue to grow. So we want to help those that are looking to age in place in Westford, would like to have options that they would like to downsize into, but just the inventory isn't there. So those are a variety of things we're trying to help in this process. So I'll turn it over to Jeff to go over the draft district, where it is, and what is an overlay, and how did we get here.
Sure, thank you. So we are proposing an overlay district. So you're probably familiar, you've seen this at some recent town meetings, but an overlay district is one that sits on top of other underlying existing zoning districts. So this is what I'll call a positive overlay district. We do not take away any of the existing development rights that property owners there currently have. So what this would allow, though, it would give them the opportunity, if they chose to take advantage of it, the ability to construct multifamily housing there. If they choose to opt in for that, they would then have to abide by the new bylaw that governs that, and they have to comply with all those standards. So it's optional if they want to participate. They're not required to participate, and they don't lose benefit of any of their existing rights. That was important to us. We did reach out to a large number of property owners since the very beginning of this process. Some folks that didn't want to participate, we removed them from that draft district. Others changed their minds along the way when they learned more and more about this and the opportunities, and they asked to be put back in. Others who were never in the mix, as the process evolved, they reached out to either the advisory committee, the planning board, or the planning staff, and asked that they be given consideration for adding. So the draft district that is in your packet, I believe, it's kind of evolved over the last year, and it was originally twice as large as it is now. And so we reacted to, and the advisory committee reacted to all the public input, the surveys, the feedback at either the open forums or the design district, the workshops. So what you have here, we believe, represents a collection of short, medium, and long-term opportunities, which we think is healthy for the community. Currently, the draft district totals approximately 350 acres. Most of it is generally located along Littleton Road and or Powers Road. I will say the state provided a compliance model that is used to determine the unit capacity. As Joe mentioned, our minimum unit capacity must be at least 924 dwelling units. So the current draft district is quite oversized by that regard. It is probably closer to almost 5,000 units. What I will say, though, is that for a community like Westford, that formula is very unrealistic. So they use the same formula whether you're more urban and you have access to municipal sewer, even municipal drainage, we need a lot more land area in Westford to have a comparable type of development. And some of the most densest developments that we believe in town is the Bell Apartments, and the closest that they got, I believe, was approximately 10 units per acre. So even though the calculation gives a high sticker price of 5,000 units, potentially, we think it's more realistic to have a range somewhere between 2,500 and 3,500 units. That would assume that every single parcel in the draft overlay gets fully developed to the highest density possible, where you don't have to worry about, you know, the sewer. Many of the constraints factor in market conditions, so it's very incredibly unlikely for that to happen. I would also say that if for some reason we do get an unexpected occurrence, things are going far faster than we thought, there are more short-term projects, we always have the opportunity to go back to town meeting and amend the overlay district, right? So as long as we don't create a non-compliant situation. And we've looked at a variety of ways to trim down if things needed to do. It's still mathematically possible to be compliant and trim it down if the community feels that's possible. But right now, the advisory committee wrestled with this from the very beginning. They were trying to figure out, should they just check the smallest box to satisfy the mandate, or do what they think is best for the community? And in the end, I think they reached a balanced approach. As I mentioned, they cut the draft district down in half, and the areas are intending to help existing challenges our community is facing. We know we have a lot of issues with vacant commercial space, office space. We have even before COVID. COVID certainly didn't help that with the hybrid and remote work opportunities. More and more of those leases are going to be coming due after COVID, and we have already seen a trend for a significant reduction for those that want to stay much smaller space, and some are just not re-upping those leases. We're trying to also target areas that have a lot of existing developed land, impervious areas that aren't being used very actively right now. We literally have some vacant parking lots that are ripe candidates. We have some underdeveloped properties that could be positively redeveloped to add to the tax base. And we're trying to also, a portion is in the Neshoba Valley ski area. As you recall, the town took favorable action to support commercial recreation. This is intended to be one phase of an overall project that could really help enhance year-round commercial recreation opportunities there by putting that customer base right there. They're trying to have not just seasonal commercial rec, but year-round with year-round employees. That's one of the challenges that they have faced. So there's a lot of thought given by the advisory committee, the planning board, and the public, and that's this district has been shaped. I don't know if we can go to the overall.
Maybe we'll go back to the overall.
I don't know if anyone has questions about the overall.
Go back to the overall. Yep.
So in looking at this, we also looked at where we have the existing infrastructure to most likely support it, where we have public transportation available, good highway access, some proximity to the MBTA facilities in the adjacent communities. So that is how we got at the where. The overview of the draft bylaw, it has a very extensive purpose section. It tries to call out some of the reasons why we are trying to propose this bylaw, and it's not just to satisfy the mandate. As I mentioned, there's a lot of challenges that we are trying to help address more than chip away at, but this is a good start towards tackling some of those problems, we think, and we've embedded the concept of leverage and flexibility. We have things like a 10% affordability requirement that we can do without having to justify. We have some significant dimensional requirements that we can do, but we're also giving the planning board the leverage and the flexibility on a case-by-case basis to waive or reduce those requirements if they think they can get a project or a feature to a project that suits what the community needs right now, what those priorities are. So one opportunity could be providing more workforce housing. That's a different level of affordability. It's between 80%, 120% of the area median income. Most of the people that were kind enough to take our surveys, most of them would not actually qualify for affordable housing. So we're looking to actually help people in our community to give them more options, and we need more kinds of housing, not just more housing, to help them in the future. We know that our population age 55 plus, 65 plus, they have doubled over the last couple decades. It's expected to double again. We know that more and more of our population is therefore going to be on fixed incomes. We think it's important to provide more opportunities for smaller scale housing that is less maintenance, allows for single level living, people to age in place, can be social, walkable opportunities, and importantly, have less tax burden going forward for them. So this isn't going to cure everything or solve everything, but it's going to give more opportunity to help more of our people in town stay in town and maybe have housing that better suits their actual needs instead of what they currently have. So, did you want to talk, let's see.
You want to talk about the vacant commercial space?
Sure. We get this question a lot. Why do we care about the vacancies in the commercial office buildings? So some of you are probably very expert at this, but residential properties, there's a lot of examples of residential sales. Most of our properties are residentially zoned. There's so many homes being sold in Westford every year. So it's very easy to get an apples to apples comparison, right? So that's what our assessing department does. But the same is not true for commercial properties. So there's generally far fewer commercial properties. They tend to turn over far less frequently, so there aren't as many sales. And there's a lot more uniqueness to them. There can be one that might be one of a kind, and it's hard to compare one business to another business. You know, sometimes there's a good match, sometimes there isn't. So the assessor has to use at least 2 different methods to determine the valuation, and one of the 2 methods they use is to also look at the income based for those properties. In other words, the rent collected. So if there's prolonged vacancies or they're not able to fetch as good a rate as they once did, that can, over time, affect the valuation of those commercial properties. So either there could be a decline, there could be a devaluation, or it just won't appreciate as much as it otherwise could have if it was fully occupied. And as you folks know, who may own homes in town, the residential properties have appreciated far, far more in value than the commercial properties. And so that shifts more of the burden to the residents. And if the commercial properties rather, are not being as vital as they can be, that too can shift more of the burden to the residential tax base. So we're looking at all these things, big picture. We can't solve everything at once, but we do know this will definitely create more opportunity for our community to hopefully prosper. And that is why I believe the advisory committee, the planning board, and even the planning staff was in support of going bigger than the minimum needed to satisfy the mandate. With more area, we get more opportunity, and we always have the option down the road. If we don't like what we're seeing happening from it, we can always go in and amend the district. But right now, this gives a good range of opportunities for consideration. So, Joe?
So maybe, Dan, we could skip ahead to some other potential impacts that we could see, or benefits. So one of the other questions that we've gotten a lot during this process is what are going to be some of the impacts to schools, for instance, the number of school-aged children. Through the work of the Budget Task Force, we saw that the number of school-aged children has actually declined over the last decade or so, down by about over 500 students. So the schools have had that number of students. It's not to say that they still have the infrastructure, the number of teachers that they would need if there was going to be an increase in number of students that they need and may need to hire more. But we do know that the schools that are there, they did have more students not too long ago. So next slide, Dan. This slide here, hopefully you're able to give it a look over before. We did a random sample of different types of properties. So it could be townhouse style, single family, subdivision developments, apartments, mill conversions, trying to look at what are the number of school-age children that come out of those developments.
In Westford, they're all Westford developments.
They're all Westford developments, yeah. And what do those costs generate too? So when you take a look at it, and again, no sample is perfect or is going to give the exact representation, but what you see is the multifamily rent side of it. You're going to get 1 student for every 4 units versus the single family side where you're getting 3/4 of a student for every unit. So it's 3 times more coming out of single family development versus multifamily rent development. Next slide, Dan. Some other town services, the select board has their solid waste and recycling policies, so anything over 4 or more dwelling units, with some exceptions, going to be providing their own trash recycling service. You're likely going to see these types of developments providing their own snow plowing, taking care of their own paving. We also looked at emergency service calls. So this is all calls. We just used the same data points. Figured it'd be easiest to compare and develop this graphic that way. And even when you take out a couple that seemed like outliers and just in the frequency of the calls that they got, there wasn't any kind of significant difference between a single-family dwelling versus a multifamily dwelling, and just in the number of calls it generates. You may go to a property more frequently just because there are more units there, but it's not because of the type of housing that's generating more calls. It's just from the number of units that are there. Next slide, Danny. Then we worked with the assessing office to look at some new growth examples. So we talked about the Neshoba Valley Ski. They have been very public about their interest in utilizing this potential bylaw. They would be looking to do some permitting in the fall, late fall, if it were to pass at Springtown meeting. With the first phase that Jeff mentioned, 300 units. You do the math through the assessing office, 1.2 million in new growth. We looked at a couple others. 37 Powers has also been public. So again, looking at a conservative estimate there. And then there's another one that isn't public yet, but they're another short-term project. So there could be a significant amount of new growth coming out in the short term over the next few years, should this bylaw pass now in March. And it's, impacting earlier fiscal year budgets if it were to pass in March than it were its special town meeting.
Does the new dwellings will get town water but their own sewage?
So they would have to provide for their own septic needs, any of these
That
developments.
we know.
Yeah.
How about the water?
They could tie into town water if it was available and there was capacity for it. I guess just by and large, on topic of infrastructure, the town is not obligated to make any infrastructure improvements for any development to happen. That is on whoever is looking to do development, so they would be responsible for that.
So we did work with the water department at the time when we prepared our initial planning. We did try to pick areas that either had the existing infrastructure to support it or would require only minor modifications, and such costs would be borne by the applicant. We can certainly go back and look again, but we wanted it to be practically developable and not have to rely on a major infrastructure improvement.
Can I add a comment to that?
If they were to tap into the groundwater for themselves, that shouldn't be any problem around Westford area, correct? Like they can drill their own well water?
You mean have a well water, a public water supply through a well? Well, that would create a substantial development hurdle, in my opinion. Once you have a public water supply, there's massive setback requirements for that, and your own wastewater would have to be far, far removed from that.
No, what I'm saying, they can have their own water system for their own occupants. Like let's say someone,
It would still be a public.
They would have to go through significant DEP permitting because they would technically be considered a public water supply around their well. They would have a radius that they can't develop. They'd have significant testing requirements. So it's in their best interest if water is available to tie into the town water system.
Thank you. Sorry, I misunderstood.
But in that vein, the water has told us that they're probably going to have a cutback on the available units. This is so out of my wheelhouse that if they're on and they can chime in. So they're not necessarily guaranteed to be able to pull out more water, have more capacity just because these are going in and they think that their capacity is actually going to shrink. Can you make more educated comments about that?
Two thoughts. One is if there's a problem with providing water, it's not our problem for them to get their development. So that's still a problem. If there's an infrastructure problem, that's their problem. It's not necessarily our problem. And the other thing I'll say is that if big picture in our water system, multifamily development is generally far more efficient than the other types of development. And actually, given that water is generally nearby, most of the properties, I think Neshoba actually gets their, Neshoba Valley Ski Area gets their water from Littleton, I believe. But aside from that, I think we generally have Westford, water system nearby these properties. I think that would actually be far more efficient and could actually make the system, much more efficient by adding more users essentially to the existing system as long as they have that capacity. So water department did look at this preliminarily. We can certainly get an updated opinion from them and also ask that they can weigh in about that.
I asked that in our questions and they did weigh in. I just don't remember what it was. I just know that there was some capacity issues there and it's not guaranteed that we'll,
And if there are issues for the new development, well, that's a bigger issue for the new development than us. Hate to sound cold, but.
Yeah, Jeff, how are you?
Great.
Listen, I just wanted to ask a couple of questions, clarify some things. You said that we're supposed to put in, what, 900, we're mandated for 924 units?
A minimum, yes.
And you exceeded that by how much?
Well, if you go by the state's modeling, let's say approximately 4,000. So
you-
say we need 1,000, we are 4,000 over.
All right, 4,000 over, all right. Have you got any commitments at this point for people who will be willing to build here?
I will say that we have 3 potential developments. I think there are some arrangements in place for 2 because they do not yet necessarily own the properties. But there are 3 what I would consider short-term candidates that they have indicated to us that they would commence permitting if this passes in March at the end of this calendar year.
Okay. So I mean, just a comment. I mean, I have absolutely no problem with multifamily housing. And as you know, when we were on the Master Plan Implementation Committee, we made that a central figure or a central part of that plan. The question I have, or the problem I have that maybe you can address is, one is the concentration of this. It's all in one area. The difference between the Master Plan Implementation Committee's recommendation and this plan was that we wanted to see the multifamily basically more integrated into the community. For example, Forge Village, up around Graniteville, even into Nab, where there would be there was a tradition of density and things like that. I'm concerned about what could happen with this if, in fact, it just all became concentrated in one area. All right, so that's something I'd like you to comment on. And of course, I'm very concerned about the compulsion involved, which is this Commonwealth. I mean, you talk about saying no. One of the things that we could, if we had risk tolerance, we could take them into court and maybe bargain for more local aid in order to get this. But that's just talk, okay? But what I'm trying to get at is that we are in compulsion, and we're not quite sure that this is going to work out quite the way we intend it to work out now. Affordable housing, what do you call it, 40B, was a good case in point. We thought that you got 10% of your housing here, you got 10% of your housing. Then what happened is the goalposts changed, right? And then there was more housing required. So if you can help me with some of those concerns, I'd be very, very grateful.
I'll see what I can do. So in terms of, say, Graniteville area, we actually have been looking at that from the planning department's perspective. We know that providing septic is actually a significant challenge in those areas.
Okay.
And a 15 units per acre does not seem very feasible there. We also have a lot of nitrogen sensitive areas, which limits the amount of bedrooms you can have per acre. So we did actually secure some grant opportunities to evaluate some wastewater treatment options in that area in particular. So we're looking at that, but there are some incompatibilities with that level of density in those small scale areas unless you can overcome some of those septic challenges. And they get worse if they're in a special nitrogen area. The second part, you talked about concentrating all in one area. It is generally along Littleton Road and Powers Road. The planning board and the MICMAC, they did consider other parts of town for sure, but they first eliminated those areas, I think, that did not have the municipal water available, because that would be a big barrier to multifamily developments. There was also, after, I forget how many town meetings ago, the friction along Route 40. And so we thought it was important to have a corridor study along Route 40. So the advisory committee and the planning board decided to hold off, given the friction that already exists, to say we should cite multifamily housing here until they've at least had the opportunity to evaluate that corridor and see what makes sense long-term for planning purposes. And just, there were other areas not along Route 40. There were some quarries that were even considered, but in the end, the planning board decided given the size of the draft district already and the potential sticker shock of the number of units, they decided to keep it to where most of the multifamily housing developments already were. They thought that would preserve more of the residential character of the town, and it would be the least amount of change for them. So they decided to scale it back to those areas that was more kind of already known to them and would be less perhaps impactful to them in their areas.
Now, just to follow up, 2 more questions, if you don't mind. The building standards for these buildings, right? Are there limits on how high they're gonna be? And what are those?
Yes. Did you want to add something before?
Yeah, just before that, so again, talking about, I guess, the concentration of the area, one other, I guess, kind of requirement from this mandate is that at least 50% of the district has to be contiguous. So if you looked at the overall map, again, Dan, I hate to be a pain, but if you start adding other areas of town, you just have to be careful about the math and making sure that your, I guess, kind of nucleus of the district still equates to 50% of the total area of the district.
Okay.
So,
And yes, we reached out
Yes.
to the OHLC. We said, if our unit capacity is way above the minimum required, are you going to hold us to that 50%? You know, if we have more area than is needed and more unit capacity, they're like, that's the guidelines. And like, you could actually be creating a disincentive to provide more housing. They said, that's the language. So we're keeping that in mind. So.
I mean, you can create more housing. The question is, what will the housing look like, right? So, for example, how high can these get? And the other thing is, are there any performance standards for them to require them to put some amenities like sidewalks, common areas, and things like that? So that doesn't turn into a Boston-looking project. You know what I mean?
Yes. So depending on the housing style, whether it's a duplex or apartment building, I'll say there are different height requirements. But generally speaking, the highest that it can be as of right is 4 stories or 40 feet.
yeah, with a special permit option to increase it with an additional story.
But that's not for nothing. You get something for something. So that's if you provided more affordable housing than was needed, or workforce housing, or if you provided some age restriction, or you provided some on or off-site improvements or public amenities that you were just talking about. So the planning board would have discretion. One of the things we're trying to do is to create or extend pedestrian-friendly networks. So there's a lot of opportunity for some off-site improvements that they can case-by-case basis look at. We also, so it doesn't look like the projects you're worried about, we also have some significant design guidelines built into the bylaw. The consultant, being architects, they laid out some perfectly fine standards, and the advisory committee said, no, we want more detail, more clarity, so it's all in the bylaw language. So there's things that would help the aesthetics of it. There's requirements for usable open space near the buildings, and there's a definite intention to provide pedestrian amenities and connectivity and things like that.
My last comment is that I think, providing we have a team like this that can monitor this, this can get out of hand if it's not managed right. And I know that town manager has been very anticipating the new growth, which I understand perfectly. But if this isn't managed properly, that new growth can evaporate very quickly in service calls and other things at that location. So that's something we need to weigh and always keep in the back of your mind. But thank you for your comments.
Yep. No, one last thing is that, we try to look at the most likely kinds of development that would result from this draft bylaw. There's no guarantee at looking at the most recent developments in Westford and what that, resulted with, so we can't guarantee that. But it does appear that the most likely kinds of development under this bylaw would be at least tax neutral, if not tax beneficial. And the more times that we can include commercial components to this, we think that's an extra for the community, and it's a better and better tax base. So I agree with you. We can't guarantee. And so I don't know if you know us, Dennis. I think you do. We're warriors. So if we see a trend that we don't like, we will be there having those discussions with the planning board and working with our financial team to say, hey, is this a good track or not? And we might need to take a look at refining or changing portions of the bylaw, if it passes, to bring us back to a course that we like, or just eliminating some areas from the district. It's also possible, if we do adopt a bylaw, it is possible for the town to consider a property that's not yet in that district. And I think the town would have a good bit of leverage then, where you could say to a prospective developer, okay, what are you gonna give us? What is your project gonna be exactly? We'll look at your exact proposal and see if that is right for our community. If we think it is, we can get a development agreement in place, and maybe if town meeting is willing to support it, we'll consider adding that for this specific project, so it's not an open-ended unknown. So that's also an opportunity.
Okay, good, thank you.
We also think there's a benefit to Westford passing this in March instead of an October town meeting, not just because we could see new growth sooner, but we could get the best opportunity for some of the best developers to come in and come to Westford instead of a competing community.
Sounds like it might start to get into why we were hoping they may support it. Should we go to that?
Why don't you do that?
Dan, if you could go to that section of the presentation.
I'll start with, we need more housing.
Specifically, truly affordable housing, not.
That's the key,
So,
that's the key.
we do need more housing, but the state's requirement, their big picture goal is to just get more housing. Like, they're leaving it to the individual communities to tailor it to their needs. So we do have embedded in there the 10% requirement of 80%, 10% of the units be affordable, 80% of the area median income or less. We are suggesting that there is also value to the workforce housing that is between 80% to 120% of the area median income. We think we really owe it to our population, our aging population, to provide, more options that they might actually want for housing in the future. As we said, that is smaller, easier to maintain and manage, and may have less tax burden going forward. That's important to us, because we know that part of our population, they're gonna need that more and more, and we need to be starting to plan for that now. This is a good opportunity, especially where we only need a simple majority vote at town meeting instead of the normal 2/3 majority vote at town meeting. So,
Yeah.
Why
so
is that? Can you just elaborate on
because the state wants more housing, and they're trying to make it as easy as possible for municipalities to come into compliance. So unlike any other zoning bylaw amendment, for this and this only, you get a simple majority vote.
that? But then if they wanted to change the zone, would there still be a simple majority, or would it go to 2/3?
In our opinion, and we can confirm with town council, as long as you don't bring the district out of compliance, that's when you have an issue. If you're making changes or amending a bylaw, it's compliant now and it's compliant then, where is the compliance issue? Where's the enforcement needed if you're still in full compliance? That's why we were looking at, different scenarios if.
Yeah, so if it's for multifamily, it's highly likely that it would still be a simple majority to amend in the future.
So somebody couldn't come in here and zone it out again. This only applies if you're doing multifamily housing, right? In other words, that zoning protection, or that is evaporated a bit. It's like from 2/3 to 50%. So once that zone it's established for multi-housing, if somebody at some other time wants to come by and change it, let's say the mandate goes away, and now it's available land, and somebody wants to change that, is that always protected with just a 50% majority, or does it alter?
I would seek advice of counsel on that, and
That's a very important thing.
I agree.
Yeah. And just last thing, the 10% was for affordable housing, and then the 80% was workplace?
So the if a proposal has 10 or more dwelling units, they would be subject to 1 out of every 10 being restricted as affordable to 80% AMI or less. When I said the 80% to 120, that's the area median income, that's the workforce housing. So that's not affordable, it's a different level of affordability, and we keep using the word affordable, but affordability means something specific in terms of this law. You're earning 80% or less of the area median income. But the next step up is what many more of the people who took our surveys would actually qualify for.
Now, the state can come in and impose Section 8 too, as well, can it?
Joe, you got anything? I just think that is,
outside of the
that's, I think,
bylaw.
really
All right.
Yeah.
far field.
Before you go too far, though, can you, 10% would be affordable, what percent was workforce?
80%.
80%?
So 80 to
No.
120% of the area median income.
Right, but
is
how many
consol-
units?
Is called workforce. So we're having that as an incentive or one of our, within the purpose statement of the bylaw, and almost as one of those things that Jeff mentioned, the leverage and the flexibility. So if somebody wants to go and get some additional relief on a setback requirement, so why would we do that? Well, are they gonna provide a larger percentage of workforce housing that we can't otherwise require? So it's
So you're
almost
not,
like.
you don't have to require the workforce housing at this point?
No.
It's okay, that's where I was,
The only thing that is currently required is
the 10%.
10%
okay.
affordability.
Okay.
And we're trying to, again, build a lot of leverage but flexibility within the bylaw in order to get a diversity of housing, because if you use the state sample zoning, it's 4 or 5 pages, and you're likely just going to get the apartment block just getting dropped everywhere, and we're
With
trying to.
no amenities.
Right, and we're trying to actually provide a variety of housing types that we need in town. So that's why the bylaw is 45 pages with the design guidelines for each different types of housing and all that, so. So, next slide, please, Dean.
Say, were you able to finish up?
Jeff had already talked about some pedestrian improvements that could come out of this. One of the goals was for a district to be more of a neighborhood type of district. So some of the areas that we had mentioned, you look at and you show, we're looking to become a year-round destination. The end of Robbins Road, they already have some existing easement rights over there. 37 Powers is also in that immediate kind of nucleus area. So you could start to envision some pedestrian connectivity that you can get through that area with the existing Bell Apartments. You could think about it now, for them now, residents over there now, you have to essentially get in your car, do in order to go even to Kimball's or anywhere else. But if we're able to work with some of these projects to create some pedestrian improvements, you could walk through there, go to Kimball's, get your ice cream, and walk 10% of it off when you're walking back to your home. So that's one of the goals of this, protecting our open space. So the areas are by and large looking at vacant office buildings, vacant parking lots due to the shifting of remote hybrid schedules for some of these commercial users. And the housing you're going to see now is probably going to be more energy efficient. So next. Again, so talking about empty parking lots, the picture over here, Tech Park East, the parcels that are within the district, you can see the lack of cars in that parking lot there. That's from July 2023. But, you know, they asked to be included within the district at a time. A lot more property of Tech Park East was included. It has been shrunk down to what would be more their immediate needs. One of those 2 buildings in the picture, they have some leases coming up within the next 2 years. They still envision this area as a commercial complex, but there are some tenants that they would like to seek to come in that would like to have employees nearby, who want to live nearby. So they would like to have some sort of housing offered in this area, along with some amenity space. So you can start to think about how that can kind of shift, and you can reutilize this area in a more efficient way and bring more customers potentially to even Western Valley Marketplace that's nearby or what have you. Jeff already mentioned helping our aging population, persons age 55. It's growing and it's going to continue to grow. And again, what we hear throughout the public planning process is that they'd like to stay in town. They want to be able to age in place or downsize. They just don't have the options available to them now. Next slide, Dan. Again, do you want to cover the last one? You need to cover the last one?
Keep going, you're killing it.
So, again, Jeff has gone over the unit capacity, the tool that the state came up with to try to have all 177 communities use. It's not perfect. It doesn't really fit Westford well, given the municipal sewer situation. It doesn't factor in steep slopes. For example, at one point, Moore and Neshoba was included in the draft district. but when you plug in the entirety of Neshoba, it says you can get 2,800 units out here, but it doesn't factor in the hill for skiing down as being a hill. So we had to kind of work with their district boundaries and go work with them to say, okay, where would you actually put this? So that's why it has a funky shape over in the Neshoba property. But we don't think the 5,000 is realistic, but the area that is there, the advisory committee, the planning board are all of feeling that this is the best proposal for the town for short, medium, long-term options. It fits with our housing production plan, our master plan, and should bring us into compliance with the state mandate.
Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Haven't had enough?
Heather?
So this is mandated by the state. What we're going to be voting on in town meeting is just creating this bylaw amendment with the overlay district.
Correct.
The planning board voted on this?
We expect they'll close the hearing and vote their recommendation Monday night.
So I would want to vote after them.
So I actually wasn't even anticipating us taking a recommendation because there's no specific dollar figure attached to this.
Okay, that works.
But it was a good way to get informed because things coming down the line may come before us with a dollar tag or, something like that. So that was sort of the reasoning.
I mean, it certainly would impact new growth.
But
It would, but
But
there's
we
no
don't
direct
know how
line.
much
But-
or,
but-
what the dollar amount would be.
we don't generally take positions on a development for speculation purpose, basically, speculation of.
But I would have a question on that as far as if you have people interested in starting this fall, how long does it take before that new growth would be realized? FY '26?
So, no, not really. So, we did reach out to those 3 likely project proponents, and to the best of their ability, factoring in due diligence, permitting process, financing, construction, all those things, they indicated that FY '28 would be probably safe, but there would definitely be some portions in FY '27, and there could even be, that we don't want to take really credit for, some partial development could be as early as FY '26, not occupiable, but still enough to maybe, clip some benefit from that. But we think it'd be largely the lion's share, FY '27, FY '28 would be more certain.
We would start seeing permitting and licensing fees from some of those as early as 26 theoretically, but not accounting for it. But that would be probably the extent that we would really see that quickly, from my experience in seeing this.
It's usually for a large multifamily development, it's usually about 2 years from when they start to occupy.
I just have a couple.
Can I just go one more? So,
Okay.
you said 177 communities. We know there's a big community in the news. Are there others that aren't passing this?
Of the first round, I think that's the only one.
Wilton, I think, didn't they?
That's what I thought, too.
Well,
Littleton has until the end of this year. They did go to their town meeting to try to get really early, and it failed. But they do have more time to come into compliance.
So that's why they're not being sued, but Milton is.
Well, Jeff, you had explained at the Cameron that Milton actually passed it, but then came out of compliance,
Yeah,
correct?
so-
It's a little different situation than Littleton.
So it is different. So Littleton does have, they can't be out of compliance. They have interim compliance through the end of this calendar year. So until January 1st hits, they're technically not out of compliance. And they do have at least another town meeting or so to try to remedy that. Milton, they had a town meeting, it wasn't favorable. They had another town meeting, they
Did pass it.
did pass, and it appeared that it would be compliant, though not necessarily all the information was there, but it looked like it would comply. Then they had, as Joe mentioned, that special
Election.
ballot election, whatever, after the fact. So they were essentially going to be in compliance, and then they willfully brought themselves out of compliance. So to me, that is certainly a different situation than someone who didn't get favorable town meeting action that still has time before their own deadline. They're now out of compliance after their deadline, and they did it with a vote that, where they probably would have been in compliance, and they used state grant monies to help them get into compliance. So it's, please don't be Milton. So,
That's why the
Yeah.
government mad.
But we've used grant money
we did.
based on
Yeah.
your, yeah, okay.
So if we were not in compliance, would we have to pay back that grant money?
I'm not going to answer that. I'd
Don't
say
know. It's unknown.
Westford,
Soon, that's for sure.
Westford has been making a very good faith effort to come into compliance with this, and we're not waiting till the last town meeting before the deadline for a couple of reasons that I mentioned. But if for some reason town meeting doesn't pass it in March, we would continue to work on it and put together what we think the best proposal would be to meet the mandate by the deadline. But we're hopeful that March will do it.
And it would only be at town meeting? There's not going to be any ballot?
It is town meeting. It's a zoning bylaw amendment, so.
Can we wrap this up? Any last comments?
Just quick comments. Appreciate all the work that's been put into it. I specifically appreciate the fact that you're not just going for minimum compliance. I think it does protect against that moving goalpost, but it also does position Westford for the future as well. So I do appreciate that.
Thank you. And we do have a lot more information on our website, a lot more information, starting back from the draft action plan all the way forward, so.
Yeah. And if you
Our
do,
work.
Can I just ask
Thank you.
one more?
Sure, Heather.
So when you have affordable housing, they do not pay the same rate on their property taxes, right? And so the workforce would have a similar, I don't know what it's called, discount break?
So I actually don't know that to be the case. I think they look at the land value, the property value, and there's an assessment. So I don't believe that factors in actually. And most of the affordable under like fair housing requirements, the affordable, they have to have like the same standards and kinds of amenities and fixtures. Like you can't just do a substantially cheaper unit, call it affordable and slide it into the mix. It has to be like of the same kind and evenly dispersed throughout the project. You have to meet certain standards. You can't just put together the cheapest unit and call it affordable.
Right, I guess, but what I'm saying is I have two standalone buildings with 40 units and they each have 10% that look just like every other in there. Actually, if only one has 10% done. Is the rate of tax on those two buildings the same?
It's based on its value, the valuation.
But if they look exactly the same, it's just that one contains 10% affordable.
Yeah, usually it's based upon the structure, the type of structure it is, and the location. So we can confirm that with the assessor, but I don't believe that they're valued any less.
And these are rentals, not.
We cannot require the form of ownership. It could be for sale or rental, but the most likely kind of development is likely to be rental unless we somehow incentivize ownership, because that's what some folks who took our survey say they want. They want to be able to own and not rent.
I guess at some point I'd like to know that, because I feel like I'd looked before, and if I had two standby townhouses and one was 40B and one was not, they did not pay the same rate, was my recollection.
We can look that up simply. We have some existing 40Bs where there's an affordable unit right next to a market rate, and we can see if there's any difference in valuation. We're happy to
Thank
get
you
back
very
to you.
much.
Thanks, Nick.
Yeah. Great. Thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Jeff and Joe.
So, on to, as we continue our march down the articles. Article 1 is to approve the fiscal year 2025 general operating budget with the proposition 2.5 override. So, as I think most people heard last night, the select board did vote to go ahead with the $6.8 million override.
Free to do what they want.
The fiscal 25 budget was reduced by 1.1 million. I think that kind of recaps that we've gotten details on the override, how that will affect property taxes, what the, kind of what everything looks like going out through FY '28, what reductions will be taken, and what the reductions were in the 1.1 million. So does anyone have questions,
I'll make
comments?
a comment.
Wait, just before did I miss anything, or did
There
you
is
want to add?
someone, Valerie Young is online. She would like to make a comment whenever, and if you're allowing comments this evening.
Okay, let me get to the board first, and then we'll get to her.
So I know we went from 8 to 6.8, so 1.2 down. And I really feel like we needed to put our best foot forward, and I'm not sure that the 6.8 is where it's at. We had 1.2 kind of on the table from the schools after FinCom asked them to sharpen their pencils, and that didn't include any discounts from the town. So the fact that we've kind of pulled some of that, or the select board has pulled some of that back from them, I just don't feel like we've put our best foot forward, and I can't ask my fellow taxpayers to support that level of an override when there's more meat on the bone, in my opinion.
Okay. Dennis?
Yeah, I would, I'm not sold on the override either. The property tax is the most regressive tax there is. It's a tax on someone's vital need, their dwelling. There's no doubt in my mind that the level of taxation you're talking about here is going to hurt a certain percentage of the population in this town. A lot of them will be seniors and elders, and I also think this is going to be a very divisive issue for the town. I'd like to look at it from three angles, and then I'll stop. The first part we have is a problem that involves inflation, energy prices, and health care. I view these as kind of self-inflicted injuries based on policies in Washington. Scott Hazelton at one of the meetings made he talked about this and said that, these can be corrected. So the bottom line is that it's a possibility that in a year or possibly a two, there can be changes to that. So I'm very reluctant to go all in on a high tax when these types of situations may be rectified. Second, there's the state issue, which is a significant one. It's obvious that the state is now withdrawing its local aid from this community in particular, and I think everybody is in agreement here that we cannot fund all of our services through the property tax. If we were to try to do that, we would basically engage in economic cleansing of this community, and a lot of them people would leave. Many of them who were born here. Then it comes down to the town side, the town physical side, and the first comment that I have is that it seems to me from the information that we took, and we've had extensive sessions, that the school committee committed itself to a salary scale without ever considering whether the town had the capacity to pay for it. I think that's a significant oversight, and I think it may have some ramifications on the budget. I also am aware of the fact now that the school department has significant reserves that have not been really examined and are not able to be, as to what can be let out of that to cover some of these costs. I think that's important. We've talked about the contract management in the town, the fact that the contract management has been in many years, year to year, where it needs to be term-based with a percentage fixed income. We've also shown that the public safety has been top-heavy and should be looked at, and the transportation provided to the seniors needs to be compensated at some guide. We cannot go off and foot the bill. And the last thing I will say is this: I am really not in favor of a stabilization fund where we collect taxes from an override and put them into a fund to pay down succeeding costs year after year. I think that violates every conventional method of fiscal control for a government organization that I'm aware of. Creating these pots, I mean, we have free cash, but as you know, free cash is really scrutinized very carefully. To move money out of free cash requires a lot of effort and procedure. To put this money in an account is just going to make an enticement to draw off it. And if it does break down and people do draw it, all we do is get into a bigger hole. So I am not in favor of this override as it's currently constituted. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else?
So I have procedural question more like, so in the town meeting, we are putting this override, right? And then there's not, the regular one won't be in the town meeting, right? Articles, correct?
It will be.
It will.
It will
So the town meeting will be voting on the fiscal '25 budget that requires a Proposition 2.5 override under Article 1.
Okay.
That can be voted yes or no. We also have under Article 4, the fiscal year '25 budget that does not require an override, that has significant cuts to town and school services and staff.
Got it.
We are putting that on the town meeting warrant with the notion if the override does pass at town meeting, but does not pass at the ballot, we still have a budget to fall back on July 1st.
You answered my procedural question.
Okay,
Thank you. I was more thinking like, earlier, I think I may have heard that if Article 1 passes, we're gonna retract Article 4.
No.
But we're gonna take both articles forward.
Correct.
And if override in the ballot voting passes, we'll take Article 1, otherwise we'll take Article 4.
Correct.
And
Right.
just to clarify for anyone that might be watching, the reason to do that is we can't enter July 1 without a budget,
Correct.
correct? So we would, if we don't have that second vote, we could find ourselves having to have a special town meeting scrambled in there.
Correct.
Right,
Okay.
right.
So did the stabilization fund logistics that as portrayed here, did the town council looked at it and then said it's okay to do it
Yes.
that way?
Yes.
It is. Anybody else have comments? Beth?
I don't know if anyone else online. I'm supporting the override because I think it protects our services. I think it protects our school district. I know many people who move here for the school district, and we still have children in our district who are dealing with COVID-related lags. And those extra services are going to be needed to help our students have the best foot forward for their education. And I know it's a sacrifice for many folks in town. And I think other communities are also dealing with similar inflationary costs. I know Groton is looking, Acton is looking at an override. I'm not sure what other communities we know of, but
Couple of other ones.
Dunstable,
Yeah.
also, Dunstable has a question on their ballot as well.
I'm happy that we're going to bring our teachers and our staff up to market basket and pay them fairly, that we're gonna support our staff. You know, I think it is embarrassing that we're underpaying our teaching staff, and I'm concerned if we're not passing the override with the stabilization fund, that the outlying years, we're gonna continue to have larger and larger cuts, and that's very concerning for, you know, the character of Westford. So I'm supporting the override.
Thanks, Beth. Do you want to, Tom?
So I agree with Dennis on some of the points. I do struggle with the idea of the stabilization fund. I recognize the need for it and the logistics. I do have the concern that it may be, and I expressed this last night at the select board meeting, that might be the proverbial straw that breaks the vote. So I do have that concern. I do think that some of these pressures are, you know, they're just from years of not having some of the increases in industry just blew up and we can't keep pace. So I definitely recognize the need for the override. I do struggle with the establishment of the stabilization for the same reason that it's not my mistrust of government, but I think the general climate right now is a mistrust of government and the perception that it's going to be just drawn on to solve all problems and not move us forward, if you will. Like it could be perceived that that's a way to kick the can down the road of really addressing the root cause. So I think we need to be very honest and commit to addressing those causes. And I'd actually really like to see something in writing, if it was even possible, to say, here's the policies of how we're going to use that stabilization fund.
So,
Ingrid's online too.
Ingrid, go ahead, Ingrid.
Sorry, I have a cold. I think, everyone has expressed so many concerns over these past weeks, months of hearings, and I too am disappointed that the override is at this level. I think I absolutely believe we need an override. Municipal government is our people, and we need to compensate our staff in all the departments fairly and competitively. I do believe that there are some with the revolving funds, and there's some other ways that we perhaps could have gotten the override number down. But in the end, it's not our purview. That is the select board's decision. Because we have one number to vote on, the risk, I think, is too great to not pass it. I think we just also have to have faith in our fellow boards and staff to manage the funds properly and minimize, the need for future overrides in the out years. So, whereas, as with much of all of this, there's compromise involved. I see this as a compromise that I don't think anyone is ever completely happy, but in the end, I do think the override is necessary.
Thanks, Ingrid.
One more thing real quick.
Sure.
Sorry. I also it reminded me, the model is not that the 1.1 million this year is the only cuts. There is already built into the modeling significant cuts in the next 2 fiscal years. Past this. So that is something to keep in mind, that this isn't the magic wand that solves all the problems, and we won't have cuts and reductions in the coming years. So that's something that we do need to keep in mind and keep educating people on.
Right.
Sorry, I just want to echo what Ingrid said, that I'm really, I do think there's a need for an override, but the fact that it came in at 6.8 million when FinCom offered 1.7 of suggestions, plus there was another 400,000 from the schools, that would have been over 2, and then to come up with a 1.1, I feel like at some point somebody's got to put a stake and say, no, you shouldn't have done that. You should have worked a little harder, Board of Selectmen, and so I can't condone it and support it.
Yeah, just to give you an approach, what the approach is I think we should take here is, I think if we look at the budget situation as an exigent circumstance, which a lot of things happened at once, the first thing that we should try to do is see if we can not engage in burdening the taxpayers, realigning our spending the best we can to meet the contingencies for a year, looking at restructuring as we've talked about. Now, after we've done all that, and this situation still persists, then that's an entirely different story as far as I'm concerned. But right now, I don't think we've put ourselves in a position where it's our last resort.
So my thoughts on this are that this whole exercise for starting with the budget task force all the way through, has been a collaborative effort, and it's been a compromise. I think FinCom's at one end, and you've got other people at the other end. So yes, FinCom did put forth, 1.7 in reductions. They came up with 1.1. That's, in my mind, that's not a horrible compromise. Yes, I would love for the 6.8 million to be lower, but again, I realize that there are balances, right? We're trying to balance the services and keeping those services in town, and with the residents' ability to pay, because this does not escape me that this is big for residents. I completely understand that, but like I said, I think this is a compromise, and the risk to not passing this is too great in my mind. If we were to lower this a couple of $1 million, what is that dollar difference to the residents? it's a couple $100. I'm sure that means a lot to some people. Is it worth 40 FTEs and laying off, 2 police officers, 2 firefighters, whatever? In my mind, I don't know that it is. But I will say, going forward, I think we need to, continue to look at efficiencies, which town manager, select board has said we will do with quarterly updates. And there was mention of continuing something like the budget task force. So I think that's something that gives me some hope that, we'll have eyes on things going forward. The other thing is that I also think going forward, we need to incorporate we need to figure out some way to incorporate the residents' ability to pay increases in taxes with our budgeting and benchmarking. Like, we need to work that in somehow with this comparable community thing that we keep doing. And I don't exactly know what that is, but there needs to be something. And I think we also need to investigate any and all ways to give residents relief, whether that, not just for the relief that's for seniors and people of lower income that are out there now, but, maybe we look at reducing the CPA surtax. We may not decide to do it, the risks may be too great with the money we're losing, whatever, but look at the numbers and see if that gets us something. And I think we should also look at our tax rate. I know we've looked into shifts in commercial versus residential tax rates, but right now, for the last, I don't know how many years, the commercial valuation has been practically zero. And so everything, just like Jeff said earlier, everything gets shifted onto the resident. And so again, not saying we absolutely do this, but when it comes time to set tax rates, maybe we look at shifting just a little bit onto the commercial properties so that their property taxes are at least going up based on, in relation to inflation or something, some slight increase, which will reduce tax, the residents' tax bills. I think, Tom, you had made a point about how the stabilization fund would be used in the future, and I know other towns have done like a memorandum of understanding afterwards, and we had talked about doing something like that so that going forward it would be spelled out very clearly as to what was going to happen. And I think my last question on the stabilization fund, I definitely I can see that being an issue for people. I understand that. What comes to mind in my head is if we don't have the stabilization fund, you end up without that, without the ability to sort of slowly make changes over the next few years and adjust to the contracts that we know are already in place, the increases that we know are already going to happen. Dennis, to your point, yes, electricity or something may come down, but I think some of those things are such a small portion of this problem that I'm just not sure that it's going to affect it as much. I mean, I get your point, and things could change, like Scott was saying, but I feel like there are things already in place that we know are not going to change in the next couple of years. So those are my thoughts, but I don't know if anyone has anything else.
Just one point. One point. I think one thing that's very important is to the Board of Selectmen, we've got to engage our state representative a lot more than we're doing. I mean, this whole situation involves state programs that are really recognized, and we haven't heard a thing from him. So I think it's very important that he be summoned to the table just along with the rest of us.
And we have requested a meeting with Senator Cronin and Rep. Arciero that we hope to have in April.
Good.
We are working with their schedulers for that meeting.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that, Dennis. That was one of my points, and I guess I didn't write it down, but thank you.
But I also, just on state revenue, I also think it's important to point out that a lot of the positions at the town level are seeking grants and are bringing in grants through their positions. So, we are getting funding that way as well. It's not like general fund, undesignated aid, but we are bringing in grants, and if we cut those staff positions, you're not going to be accessing those grants.
I think Dan told us that state assessments have now surpassed the money that's coming in. I think I heard that.
Not quite, we're still getting a small increase, but it's less than $100,000 net
Okay.
in state aid.
Thank you.
So any other?
I have few statements, but just redundant, probably everybody has said. Not any day since the budget cycle has started that I have stopped thinking about this. And until beginning of this meeting, I haven't really concluded which way yet. So I haven't concluded. But the few things which I have is the Massachusetts state budget increased by 7%, but
Good.
we got 0.7% increase. So there are a lot of things. And stabilization fund, there are a lot of things said about it which I agree with. One thing which I have problem is, if a taxpayer who resides in Westford 2425 pays 6.8 million part of that person's share and moves away from Westford, right? So they're actually paying for the sums that they don't receive benefit for. As I understand, most of the government funding works, except for bonding, should be spent within the same year. Cash, free cash and other things are like, I would say is a change, like they're like very small amounts. So that's one. But two things is, one thing, we have a town need that we need to meet, and it also causes extraneous amounts of pain to the residents, right? So the balance is, I think this budget which I have seen, it didn't meet the balance as much as I hoped. But again, it's like once in a generational thing that it's a correction. As I am taking this as a correction as opposed to a mistake or somebody did something kind of thing. Again, there might be some inadvertent mistakes, but those are things that we all do. So that's where we are, and it's a tough decision, but I'm moving in favor of this.
Any other comments from the board, and then I'll go to Valerie. Nope, I think, okay. Valerie, would you like to make a comment?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
These comments would have made more sense at public forum at the start of your agenda, but I missed that. So I just wanted to go on record to reiterate a message that I shared at your last meeting, which is to ask each of you to think about the power of your words, both here and in other settings. I think we owe it to the months of work that has taken place not to use the word override as a negative word. It does not need to immediately imply mismanagement or overspending. It's intended as a tool to help respond to escalating costs, which we are facing. This override is not there to add new things. It's simply the increased cost of continuing existing staff and services. Residents who are not well versed in the budget often look to our finance committee for advice and guidance, and you can be leaders in the community to help set the tone for these conversations. Our town has had divisive budget cycles in the not too distant past, and so I'm asking for you to be thoughtful in your comments. I get it if you feel that the process has not been perfect, but it has been open and diligent process with a lot of partnership and compromise. And I know that some of you have hesitations, and I realize these brief comments are unlikely to change your minds. But my request is just to remember that comments made are often repeated elsewhere without context and can lead to distrust and ultimately do a disservice to the massive amount of work that has happened over the last year. I forgot to introduce myself. Valerie Young, speaking as a private citizen. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Valerie. Anything else before we entertain a motion to recommend Article
One more
1?
procedural question.
Sure.
Probably. So we have 3 procedural votes, one for the budget override, one for stabilization fund establishment, and the third one is for funding the stabilization fund.
Mm-hmm.
What happens if the first one passes and second one and third one doesn't pass?
So there's several things that can happen. One is that the budget is the budget, and we would not raise the levy any higher than is required by the budget. And we would not establish the stabilization fund, and we would not fund that. We could come back at the October town meeting to request the creation and the funding of the stabilization fund if the override question passes at the ballot in May.
And the override money will be sitting in free cash or someplace?
No, it would not be collected
We will
until.
not be collecting it okay. Got it.
Until I mean, we'd be collecting some of the override money that would be used to fund the fiscal '25 budget, but we would not be collecting that
Oh, the stabilization fund, okay,
that would go into
got
the
it, got it.
stabilization fund.
And then that would reduce that tax levy that next year's Prop 2.5 would be based on, is that correct? Basically,
No, we would always have that 6.8 million
Okay.
added to the tax, it would be
Okay.
permanently added to the tax levy,
Okay.
but we would not have that stabilization fund to balance fiscal '26 and beyond.
Gotcha.
And you would have a right to collect the 2.6 million in the subsequent tax year.
Correct.
Not the override amount. Once, if we don't pass that in
The amount
March
that's
or
not collected
October,
because we can,
yeah,
the amount
that's-
that, yeah.
That's gone. Like, there's two opportunities to do that. You can only do it in FY '25, because in FY '26, once we're gonna be at the levy limit, so there's no more capacity to raise that additional 2.6 million for stabilization. So it's just a one-time shot really at doing this. And the impact would be an additional $400,000 in cuts in FY '26, extra 1.1 million in both '27 and '28.
Got it.
On top of what's already projected.
On top of what's
Of
already.
cuts.
So you're actually looking at,
Yes.
if I remember correctly, like almost 2 million in reductions over those next 3 years.
Like 1.3 and
Rounding
2.2
numbers,
and 2.2.
Yeah.
We
so-
did the math right before this meeting, actually, talking to Tom Clay, and it was about 25 full-time positions by FY '28 would be the impact of not passing the override stabilization.
Just echoing again, it's so unfortunate that it came in at 6.8 because I feel like people are so crunched with their numbers, and I know we keep talking about the schools, but to be a community, you need to be more than just families of schools, and I worry we already have a larger population of students compared to our towns, and I feel like we're just gonna exemplify that even more, and it's too bad because I feel like we do need something, but it's gonna drive people away.
Okay, are we ready for a recommendation?
I'd move to recommend the budget as proposed.
Oh, wait a minute.
Under Article 1.
Under Article 1.
This is-
Sorry, I
Fiscal
don't,
year 2025
I-
general operating budget, Proposition 2.5 override.
Right, that's with the override.
This is for the override. Mhm.
Sorry,
So we've
I
got-
didn't have the number in front of me,
That's
so.
okay, we've got a motion,
Second.
we've got a second, okay. All in favor, Ingrid?
Aye.
Shelby?
Aye.
Beth?
Aye.
I'm an aye. Tom?
Aye.
Aye.
Hari? Dennis?
Nay?
Nay.
Heather? Nay.
No.
Okay, so we're now 8-2.
6 to 2.
6-2.
Sorry, 6-2.
8 total.
8 total. knew
I know
eight
we're
was
reaching the limit.
somewhere. Okay. So Article 2 is the establish an override stabilization fund. Do we have questions on that? Do we have any comments? I feel like we kind of made some of them during the last one. Could I get a motion to recommend Article 2 establish?
I make the motion to recommend Article 2, establishing an override stabilization fund.
Beth, second?
Second.
Second, okay. All in favor, Ingrid?
Aye.
Shelby?
Aye.
Beth?
Aye.
I'm an aye. Tom?
Aye.
Aye.
Ari? That was an aye.
Aye.
Dennis? Nay.
No.
Heather? No. Okay, again, 6-2. And Article 3, fund the override stabilization fund. Any questions, comments?
Make a motion to recommend Article 3 to fund the override stabilization fund.
And a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, Ingrid?
Aye.
Shelby?
Aye.
Beth?
Aye.
I'm an aye. Tom?
Aye.
Aye.
Ari, aye. Dennis?
Nay?
Heather?
Nay.
6-2. Okay. Article 4, we're gonna wait. So Article 4 is the fiscal year 2025 operating budget.
Levy
No,
limit.
just,
No override.
Levy
no
limit.
override, just level. We're gonna wait and take motions on that on the floor of town meeting right before the vote, just so there's, because if somebody looks at this and sees that we recommended both, I think it just gets a little confusing, so we're gonna do, if the select board's gonna do the same, so we can kind of explain why.
And would we
Why
be
we're doing
voting on the
that.
total then, or on the,
That's a good question. I don't know.
So the moderator's always gone through line by line, so we'd have to do it twice, it seems like, in this. Just in case there's a question on one of the non-override budget line items, which there very well could be, so. She hasn't said that definitively, but during our motions meeting on 13th, 14th? 13th, we'll solidify that plan.
All right, done with that. Our 8:30, it's a little late. Old business. I think the biggest thing we've got is the Finance Committee book, which I assume everyone has been able to access it.
I have verified access
Okay.
and it's done now, so we
Okay.
have to key in our things.
So all of the edits need to be done by Sunday night or, before 8 a.m. Monday morning when Dan shows up at work to start the rest of the editing.
so have
We
the
should only
charts
be
been
working on
updated?
our section, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, just your section. Yep.
Mine's the Tom, so.
Yep, and you guys are all set with the schools. Heather, did you
Are
have
the numbers in the charts yet?
So the tables,
Have not been updated yet.
Yes,
I
they
haven't
have
had a chance to do that so far,
But-
so.
you're gonna do the
I'm happy to do it,
tables?
yeah.
Okay.
I can do tables, so I'll plug in, we're still coming up with a little convention on how to put in the two budgets there.
Yeah.
And what's the best way so it fits and whatnot, so if you have the narrative there, that's great. If you need the numbers, like we have the budget posters in your packet tonight, so just use those for reference, and then we'll figure out a format that's consistent throughout the book. That looks good.
So just I have water enterprise and stormwater, right?
What'd you say?
I have water enterprise and stormwater.
Definitely those two.
Dan probably has
Yeah,
the list of
I
who
know
to
I wrote it
hound.
down somewhere. When are we?
Along addresses if, you don't have your stuff to them by Monday morning.
I don't know where I have that. Why don't,
I have it in my
Dan, I
text.
think I have it somewhere, or if you can find it, why don't we just send out an email just to make sure that everybody
Knows what they're
knows their sections?
Sure.
Okay,
We
thanks.
gave you water and stormwater enterprise.
There you go. That's right, because you weren't there. I'm gonna do the summary. If anybody has any inputs, though, please send them to me. And then I think the rest of, some of those other sections are, I think, a lot of times, Dan, you update some of those other beginning sections, the budget policy, the direction,
Yeah.
there's a few other things like that.
Yeah, those are
They were already updated.
Yeah, they're documents that are already written, so I just plug those in for you, so don't worry about those. I can get those done.
Okay, and Heather, you have capital
And DPW.
and DBW.
I'm just curious on the capital piece, because, we have, because of our segregation tonight, I don't know how to do that. Right, because there's a list of capital, and it's almost like I want to be able to asterisk a couple and say, FinCom didn't.
Yeah,
I
I mean,
tried
you
to-
could, or you could follow, like, you look in the motions, how they did something like that, just with another column.
Okay.
I'll
But-
leave it
And so
to you
you're
to-
fine with me putting that in the document that our votes kind of.
I'll leave it to
okay.
you to figure
Okay.
out how to explain that to the residents.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I think.
Does anyone else have any other questions? So we'll get out everyone's, just as a reminder, everyone's section, just in case, but yeah, just work on your section, and like we said, there's no reason to go through, well, let me talk about, so a lot of times we spend a lot of time saying, this went up X, X percent, X dollars, blah, like everything that just was said in the table. I think we all kind of
Yes,
agreed
that's
there's
right.
probably no real reason to do that, just kind of get into the meat of what's happening with the override budget. And the way I did public safety is I kind of followed the budget, and I gave a description of what the change was in the override budget, and then I put description of changes with no override and,
Yeah.
and added that.
Yeah, I think Dennis had written up if the override is not passed, these are the additional cuts that have been identified.
Yeah, I think
kind of
it's-
thing.
I think it's-
Just kind of itemize and.
I led with the override to explain what it was gonna be, and then I put what it
Yeah, I think we should lead with the override, because that's sort of the the main budget before everybody, that's kind of the one, yeah, and then the description of changes. And, I mean, if you have any issues trying to figure out what the changes are now, because there were those additional, I mean, just ask. But we have
I
that.
count on Dan to know where those changes are.
So I was working on a table today that had the changes, so I'll send that out to everybody, so it's just summarized.
Okay.
And in your overview, are you gonna write about some of the stuff that you address?
Yes.
Following up with,
Yep.
you know, okay.
Yep. And if I miss anything, please let me know. I'm still yeah, I'm in the very beginnings of writing it, so it's still sort of in my head, but. Yeah.
So now, it's all due to Dan by Monday morning.
Say Sunday.
When
night.
does it go to print?
It has to be posted to the website on Friday.
Okay, so there could be a couple days that we could just kind of take one quick skim back through to.
Everybody who wants to edit is much welcome to do so. The more eyes on.
Yeah, we want to make sure like
Yes.
Tuesday afternoon that we're in like pretty
Yeah.
good shape, because then we're going to
Yeah,
probably
yeah,
be
yeah.
sending it
No,
to
I-
staff for proofreading
Right,
type of
right.
things.
Yep, okay.
Yeah, and at some point we'll have to lock it down or something. I don't know
Yes.
how you do that.
Yep,
but-
we can lock it down. Yep.
But Dan saves his
Take
own
away
copy,
editing
and any
privileges.
changes made to it after that, they don't.
So, do we mail postcards too?
Yes, and
Those
we're
cards
working
are
on that now. That will be mailed out on the 12th.
And then physical copies of the finance book will be at certain locations around town, right?
Yeah, town hall, library, senior center,
Police station.
police station.
Does that have to be Friday too?
Yes.
Yes.
So. No pressure.
If you need delivery, I can offer my services. If you print them, I can take a handful to those locations.
It doesn't necessarily fall under any of these, but I do want to, if anyone else is watching for the first time, point out the open forum on Monday, is that correct? In
Yes.
this room here at Millennium?
Correct.
Or on Zoom?
So yes, there's our final budget open forum, 7 o'clock Monday, March 4th here at Millennium. It does dovetail in the planning board public hearing on MBTA communities. So planning board will be televised live on WCAT. We will be hybrid here. People will be able to join on Zoom or come in person. And then that YouTube showing should be available Tuesday at noon on WCAT.
Anything else before we get into approval of minutes? Nope. Okay. Approval of minutes? Can we do
I'd like to
all
move
of
that way,
them, or?
approve them as consent.
Okay. So motion is to approve the February 1st, February 5th, February 15th, 2024 meeting minutes.
Yes.
And can I get a second? Second, Hari. Okay. All in favor? Ingrid?
Aye.
Shelby?
Aye.
Beth?
Aye.
I'm an aye. Tom?
Aye.
Hari?
Aye.
Dennis?
Aye.
Heather?
Aye.
Okay. All right, and for right now, so just also as a reminder, the League of Women Voters is having their preview night on March 14th. And I assume that's hybrid as well, or is that
Yes, it is.
online?
It's just online.
Just
It's not in person.
Okay, so that's, and then see you all March 23rd.
Game day.
Yep.
8:30 or will?
No.
So-
Check-in starts at 8, meeting starts. Like the goal is to have Article 1 introduced by 9 o'clock.
At 9 a.m. I would get there on the earlier side.
Are we having a pre-meeting or not? That's
Right now, we're not. That could change, but I don't know.
No need for it, really.
Yeah, I don't think so. So we don't need to be there for a meeting early, but you may wanna
Just get it
get
done.
there early.
No, I get,
Just in case.
I get dropped off. That's easier than me coming in a car.
Okay. All right, can I have a motion to adjourn? Second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right.
Aye.